All right, do you want to go? Or
One.
just two?
Oh. Wait.
Fuck.
Hold on. We'll try it again. Ready?
Yeah.
One,
Two,
three,
four.
five.
No,
How many times do we go?
just until four.
Oh.
Welcome to hashtag Deep the Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Apple.
And I'm your other host, Spoons.
Today we are discussing a pretty heavy topic. Before that, we have a little disclaimer. We have a guest
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. If you hear some banging noises or scratching noises or gnawing noises, my service dog in training is home for the week, and she's going to town on a bone right now.
We love her.
It's the only way she'll stay calm. So
Yeah.
yeah. So just disregard that if you hear it.
Also, I do want to issue a big trigger warning for this episode. We are going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and Netflix's special that they put out recently called Monster. If you guys don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, I'm gonna guess that most of you do. He's pretty infamous, considering. Jeffrey Dahmer is a pretty infamous serial killer. I'll talk more about his info in a little bit. Today's my episode, by the way. I should have said that. We're
Woo!
not here yet.
We're both having a time right
We're
now.
both struggling. But I did want to talk a little bit about his information, give you a little lowdown. But that's the main thing for today. There is just a trigger warning for essay, murder. I don't really know what to say. The guy's a serial killer.
I
He's
think
known for
just in
being, yeah,
general, trigger
he's just a
warning.
nasty guy. Again, Google is free, but you'll learn probably a lot about him today. So, before we begin, do we have any questions about Jeffrey Dahmer? Because
Um,
man's got a lot to say.
yeah, I feel like let's go over basic info first,
Okay.
and then we'll go from there.
If I'm looking off screen, by the way, it's because I'm looking at my notes. I have them over here. So,
Let's just, as a disclaimer for the rest of these episodes, if we're ever looking off screen, it's because we're looking at our notes.
it's because notes, because we want to make sure we're talking properly. So, Jeffrey Dahmer. Kind of hate him. He's a really weird guy.
If you like Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm concerned for your mental health.
Yeah, I mean, that goes for any serial killer, but specifically, Dahmer's pretty gross. Anyways, he was a serial killer active between 1978 and 1991. When he was eventually caught because he's a dumbass. Sorry, I'm gonna be roasting the shit out of Jeffrey Dahmer today.
Don't apologize for roasting a serial killer.
I'm apologizing to the people listening. Don't have your kids in this episode, okay? So he was convicted on 16 counts of first-degree murder. He was convicted with 2 counts of disorderly conduct, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically just like public indecency, being drunk in public. And then he was only convicted for 1 count of second-degree SA or sexual assault. I'm just gonna be saying SA anyways for the remainder of this. And also for enticing a child for immoral purposes, because he is a disgusting man and did a lot of bad things to children. So he was convicted and sentenced to 16 life sentences, which is 941 years, without the possibility of parole. And then, because he was a gross person, he died in prison because people killed him in prison.
Fun fact about the prison system: I think it's mostly like rapists and child molesters. They will murder you in prison.
Oh yeah.
Other criminals will kill you in prison.
It's a lot of
this
people...
video is not going to be monetized ever.
No, it's not. But the reason for that is if you are put in a cell, I know this because whatever. Everyone who knows true crime kind of knows this now because it's been talked about more recently. But if you are put in a cell with a child predator or a rapist or whatever, most of the time it's kind of your duty in the prison system to get rid of the guy.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a life sentence because you're not getting out anyways. So people just kind of look at you and be like, get rid of the dude. Like,
Yep.
People don't deserve to be alive for this. But yeah, there's some stuff about him. I also do have a full list of the victims' names, but I'm gonna do that at the end of the episode because they deserve to have the spotlight here. Not that they deserve to be, re-traumatized, because that's what we're talking about today. But these people deserve to be known. He has 16 victims that most people don't know about. They just kind of know that Jeffrey Dahmer, and that I feel like that's kind of gross.
I
So,
feel like that's the way with a lot of like infamous serial killers and stuff is they end up
mhm.
getting more attention than their actual victims.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's like kind of what we're talking about today is like the whole point of this episode. So,
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunately more common for the person who committed the acts to be more well known than the victims. And as someone who loves true crime, that will be kind of a big part of this episode. It's really heartbreaking to see that these disgusting people are more well known than the people that they hurt and the families they hurt. So, that's his basic information. He's not getting any more screen time other than the screwed up shit he did. So, now we're talking about Netflix.
oh,
Netflix, if you come for
yay.
me, if you guys didn't know in the last episode, I tried to put more Bo Burnham clips in, but
Oh gosh.
I got copyrighted like
Man,
6
let me
times.
just say, since they already don't like us, fuck Netflix.
True.
I just let us use your shit, man.
Yeah, either let us use your stuff or just, don't make
I feel
shitty
like
stuff.
technically, our stuff would kind of fall under fair use if we're putting clips in, but they don't care
Technically,
about
yeah,
that.
but because it's has to do with like audio copyright, so
Yeah,
technically it's like DMCA.
yeah,
Unfortunately. So like
which
the
is
footage
so
I can
stupid.
use, but the audio I can't. So I can either show you muted clips, which don't really benefit anyone, or don't put them in at all.
Yeah.
I will say
Anyway.
though, if you're thinking about watching Monster, just don't.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna get heated. I'm already feeling that I'm
No,
getting
let's do
heated.
it, man. I'm ready. Let's
Um,
freaking do it.
so the show is called Monster, fitting. Um, and it follows more so the actual pursuit of his victims. In my case, that's what I did not finish the whole show. I felt really icky after watching. I watched the first 3 episodes. Very icky.
I watched the trailer and for my own mental health I said this is not something I can watch.
Yeah.
So,
Not a great feeling. I also do want to point out that Monster on Netflix is the second retelling in the last 5 years of Jeffrey Dahmer. There was a lot of people know about Ross Lynch, who played Jeffrey Dahmer in a movie in 2017 called My Friend Dahmer. And although a lot of people see it as less than because it was more so about him in high school and like him growing up, which I don't know why that was really needed. It's like it feels like they're trying to sympathize. Like they're trying to give this person like emotions that I don't know. The dude's a psychopath, so I don't know why we're trying to give empathy to this dude. Um, but Ross Lynch was given a lot of heat when he took that role because it was right after he left Disney.
oh.
Yeah, so Ross Lynch, Austin and Ally, he went and played a serial killer, which I don't know, do your thing. He got paid for it, I guess. Um, but it's making a lot of people realize how weird it is that now Evan Peters is playing Jeffrey Dahmer in the new show on Netflix. And a lot of people are having different controversy with Ross Lynch versus with Evan Peters. And no hate to either of these actors. Obviously, we can't really understand how they took the role if it was something that they personally, you know, wanted to, or if an agent signed them up for it, whatever. We can't take what they are thinking for face value, unfortunately. But a lot of people are recognizing. I keep closing my window. A lot of people are recognizing that Evan Peters is being put in much more positive light than Ross Lynch because he is a conventionally attractive actor. And a lot of people are just seeing this as hot white guy playing attractive man who has mental issues. Oh my god, daddy issues, whatever.
Yeah. That's
Which
okay. I feel like here's the thing though, like I'm speaking totally objectively here.
mm-hmm.
this does not reflect my feelings about Jeffrey Dahmer. A lot of people considered Jeffrey Dahmer himself to be an attractive person. And
Yeah.
that's why he was able to attract so many victims. And so, like, I can see kind of from the perspective of whoever's casting to find someone who's conventionally attractive. So I would lay the blame less on Netflix in this case. Like, just this one small part of it, of people being, like, putting Evan Peters in a positive light, of, like, that's not the fault of casting, and more the fault of the people who are consuming the show and, like, putting Evan Peters, who is playing Dahmer, in a positive light.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little side note there.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things that I've seen personally, especially on TikTok, which shout out to TikTok for being bashed a second time already on both of our episodes.
True.
So many people are posting TikTok thirst traps, like cosplaying as Jeffrey Dahmer, but then justifying it, saying that they're cosplaying as Evan Peters. Which Evan Peters is playing Jeffrey Dahmer. So you are in turn cosplaying a serial killer. And
you can't separate the two in this case. It's
No, you
literally
really can't.
impossible to separate them. No, if you're being like, oh, I'm cosplaying Evan Peters like in his role in X-Men because he did great in that movie. But like then you're still cosplaying the character. You're still not cosplaying Evan Peters.
Mm-hmm.
You're still cosplaying the character. Like, you cannot separate the two and say like, well, I'm just doing Evan Peters. No, you're cosplaying Jeffrey Dahmer, a literal serial killer.
Yeah, and if you want, like, again, you can have a lot of love for Evan Peters. I personally really like his other works that he's done. So if you want to, like, use that, I guess, if you want to twist it into some rationalized way, there are so many other roles of his that you can cosplay as, if that's what you want to do.
So why did you choose the serial killer?
Serial killer is not the good one. Which brings me to my other topic. I'm sorry, I keep punching you guys.
It's okay, you can't hear it.
There are a lot of people that are talking about how Monster really emphasizes like the sexuality of the show. And as I talked about previously when we were talking about just Jeffrey Dahmer as a person, a lot of his crimes were sexually motivated. And so obviously, if you are trying to portray a serial killer whose motive was like some sort of sexual stuff, that has to be brought up. But I don't think that Netflix did it in a way that feels like sensitive, because we have to keep in mind there are victims here. And there are victims' families, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, because victims' families have talked about how they feel about this show and the controversy that's come out of it. Which is just, why? Why do we just, like, put away the victims and we just talk about this serial killer who's like, ooh, he's kind of hot?
Whatever. I think either way, like, why do we keep talking about them? Like, even in a way, like, I think, like, this episode too, like, and I'm saying this, like, as a person who also agreed to do this episode, like, in a way, we're also contributing to that. Mm-hmm. Of, like, just continuously bringing it up and, like, talking about it over and over. And, like, I cannot imagine, like, being, you know, the families of the victims and seeing the person who killed my loved one over and over again in news and popular media. Like, that's just...
that's why I'm trying with this episode to focus less on Dahmer himself and more on
the media,
fucked up media around it. Which brings me to why this is such a big thing. Monster has become one of the most streamed limited series on Netflix, with debuting at almost 200 million hours viewed. And it was top 10 in 92 countries across the world.
Yeah. The 200 million hours, by the way, was in the first week.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even...
Actually, that was within the first 5 days, so not even a full 7-day week.
Incredible. A business week.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So within the first 5 days of it debuting on September 23rd, it grossed almost 200 million hours. 196.2 million to be exact is what Netflix put out. But that is insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I want to know like some like, I'm trying to think like other popular shows that we might be able to like compare that to.
Well, I know like another big one that happened this year was like Heartstopper.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one got a pretty big amount of hours, but I don't think anywhere near 200 million. Which
Okay.
Heartstopper will come back into play, by the way, unfortunately. Not like 100%,
Okay,
but
here's an interesting one to compare to.
hmm.
Season 4 of Stranger Things.
Oh wow.
Let's see. 117 million hours viewed in the first full week.
That's
So
insane.
like a
Less.
little over 100 million hours. So less than this. And Stranger Things is like a big show.
That's almost double.
Yeah. That's ridiculous.
I would say Stranger Things is like one of, if not the biggest show on Netflix.
Yeah.
And to see that this one got more is crazy.
In less time too. That was in 7 days and this was only in 5.
Mm-hmm. So
Ridiculous.
before I get into the family part of it, I do want to just finish off what I think would be Netflix's not so good take on this, which would be the tagging for Monster. It was labeled as an LGBTQ series.
For our audio listeners, I just face palmed so hard.
Which, to a lot of people, yes, technically, in the most basic sense, because all of Dahmer's victims were male, I believe. Don't quote me on that. All of them were portrayed as male in the media. I'm not sure personally, you know.
I don't think, yeah, I think they were all male.
But to describe this man and put him in the same category and genre as Heartstopper and as media that should be either informational, in my opinion, if it's going to be tagged LGBTQ, it needs to either be informational, the main plot of it has to be about, you know, LGBT issues, and I don't consider a crime to be an LGBT issue. But it's insane that they thought that that was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then when the tag was removed, no official comment from Netflix was made.
Of course not, because why would they?
No, it was just removed and people started noticing after it was brought up by Netflix. So yeah, Netflix, fix yourself, please. Thank you.
Do better. I've been saying that to so many corporations recently. Just do better.
It feels
just
like
actually
the bare
listen.
minimum.
It feels like the bare minimum. And like, just actually listen to your audience. Like, I don't understand why corporations feel the need to like, so you're faced with a controversy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your audience is demanding a response. And instead of doing what your audience demands, you just sweep it under the rug?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and also, that includes like doing what we're asking and not talking about it as well. That's included in like not bringing things up because we want to hear why you did what you did.
Yeah.
Like the reason why it's being brought up and being asked to be corrected is because it's obviously doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. And so by you just removing the tag and not
Scarlett, are you serious right now? We're having a serious conversation.
But yeah, Netflix had no response. Absolutely, at least from when I was writing this all and in the last 24 hours with recording this. So today is the 11th. So if there's something that's come out after this, I didn't know about it. So don't come for me. So now we come on to the part which made me want to talk about this, which is the families of the victims have decided to speak up. And Rita Isbell, I believe that's how you say it. If I mispronounce anybody's names, I apologize. But they put out an essay, a personal essay, to, I believe it was, let me open it and see. It was Insider. They released an essay to Insider. And this is the sister of Errol Lindsay, which is one of the victims of Dahmer's. And I just want to read a few quotes because I feel like the whole essay is a great read. I will put it in the link down below as well. But some of the quotes just made me think as someone who takes in a lot of true crime media. So from one of the quotes is, I was never contacted about the show. I feel like Netflix should have asked if we mind or how we felt about making it. They didn't ask me anything, they just did it. Which, end quote, by the way. That makes sense. Netflix oftentimes doesn't ask for consent about media that they are doing. Um, but this case in particular, I feel like is important because they actually took Rita Isbell as one of the people that did an impact statement at Jeffrey Dahmer's trial, and they recreated it in the show, like word for word, because it was televised, because it was a televised trial. And so they had an actress recreate it, said everything word for word, wore the same clothes, had the same hairstyle, like to the fullest extent they could recreate it. Um, which I just feel like it's not even my right to feel any way about it, obviously. I can't even imagine how these people are feeling watching, their trauma be recreated, not only just their families. And another quote from her said, "It's not that they're just making money off this tragedy." Wait, sorry, read that wrong. "It's sad that they're making money off of this tragedy. That's just greed."
It
Which
is. That's
I
that's
think
all it
is,
is.
it's 100% greed because
You can't
obviously.
watch this show and even look for like an ulterior motive of like, oh,
Mhm.
they're trying to educate or they're trying to inform or it's a precautionary piece about like teaching people how to stay safe. You cannot watch this show and think that because
No.
that's not why they made it. There's no inkling of that even.
No, and that's one of the things that I thought about because I've said it earlier. I am a avid true crime fan or whatever. I enjoy taking in that content, but I feel like there is such a big difference between like a documentary where it's informational, it's telling you about these cases that aren't well known, which this is very different from that. This is something that's been retold 1,000,005 times. But it would be different if it was like a documentary kind of piece where it talked about how you can keep yourself safe or how this happened and how you can avoid it, or just giving, the victims more of a like ability to know who they are, and because they're the real losers here. I mean, yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer's a loser, but his family's lost loved ones, and that's obviously such a greater loss than being put in prison or whatever. Um, Another person who is the cousin of Rita Isbell, his name is Eric Perry. He spoke out on Twitter, quoting the video of Rita Isbell's impact statement. With it was like a side by side, and I'll probably try to add that here if I can find a way to grab it. So I decided, this is editing Apple here. I decided to not include the clip just because I felt a little bit weird adding a clip that I'm talking about being not so good to include, but then including it. I will link it down below if you guys are really interested in seeing it, but just I don't think I feel comfortable putting it in here after trying to, stop re-traumatizing the victims. So, thank you for understanding. But it's a side by side between the actual impact statement and the recreation. Um, and this is what I saw before I even heard about Rita Isbell. And so a quote from him is, I'm not telling anyone what to watch. I know true crime media is huge right now, but if you're actually curious about the victims, my family, the Isbells, we are pissed about this show. It's re-traumatizing over and over again, and for what? How many movies, shows, documentaries do we need? Like recreating my cousin having an emotional breakdown in court in the face of the man who tortured and murdered her brother is wild. Which I think sums up this entire episode and just the entire like reason for why we shouldn't be consuming this media, or just like why this is so controversial and why it needs to be talked about. Um because it's re-traumatizing these families for the 40 millionth time. Um and I feel like there is such a difference between enjoying like a documentary or an informational piece about what happened versus a show that focuses majority on shirtless serial killers. Because it's it's just, why are we focusing on that?
Yeah. I just think, yeah, I think Eric Perry put it perfectly. Like, why? How many do we need? How many retellings of this do we need?
To kind of, that is something I wanted to touch on because I did try to see how many pieces of media have been put out. And just on Jeffrey Dahmer alone, I found 19 different pieces. Like,
How many?
movies.
Sorry,
19.
19.
Yeah. Which, by the way, 2 of those are like theater pieces. Why do we need a theater piece? Like,
Yeah.
actors on theater. Why do we need that?
I think any information that is shared, if any, like about these occurrences, like Jeffrey Dahmer, any serial killer or like serial any of those things, you need an informational piece about what happened because it's important to know and stay educated about things.
Right.
And then like a precautionary, like, here's how you stay safe. Like that, I think that at maximum is like how much exposure these people should get. Because they don't, what are they going to do with the media attention? Like just like feed off of it. And that's what, there are so many people convicted of crimes who know that they'll get media attention. There are people who do crimes because of the media attention. And there are people who do interviews after the fact because they want the attention. Like, and the media just feeds into it, and they'll continue to do it because they can make money. And because, yes, the true crime genre is so big right now. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's always at the expense of the victims.
I just think, like, I understand if there is, like, one
Scarlet.
good documentary about certain things. I think that that's important to have victims be known. I think that's the important thing here. But I think what really stuck with me is how many of these do we need? Like, why do we need to have this rehashed, like, every 5 years? Why do we always need a new Ted Bundy documentary, a new Jeffrey Dahmer documentary, a new, show? I don't understand why we need to keep redoing things because it's not like the information's going to change. It would be different if it was like ongoing, but this happened in the 70s and 90s.
Yeah. And also, like, another thing, like, about any media that's made about criminals and serial killers, that sort of thing, the victim should always be consulted about it and always asked, number one, is this something that we can do with your, like, we have your permission to do it? Like, that should be your number one question. Is it okay if we make a piece of information, a piece of media about this horrible thing that happened to your loved one, to you? Like, is that okay with you? And I feel like that question is almost never asked. And then you get things like this where it's insulting to the victims, it is traumatizing, and it's just it's just cash grab. So
yeah, I think at most the consent of the victims is always needed, or at least the victims' families.
At least, at minimum.
At least, sorry.
Yeah. At most, you should ask them, nothing more.
No. At like bare minimum, they need to have knowledge that this is being created, and I mean before it starts.
Yes.
Not to where it's being teased to go on Netflix and the families find out that way.
Yeah. And then, like, even beyond that, they should be involved every step of the way. If they would like to. If they would like to, and if it's not traumatizing.
Any revenue, Netflix, any revenue needs to go to the victims' families.
Exactly.
I don't understand why you think you need to make more money. Because you definitely are doing fine financially.
Yeah.
So it's just, overall, the controversy has made me upset. And it also is like, why am I upset? It doesn't have anything to do with me. So the last thing is just my thoughts. Which honestly have...
I can give my thoughts too.
Yeah, you can give your thoughts as well. But for me, it's just, what I think of the show, why I think it's important to talk about the victims. But as again, I said, I'm a true crime fan. I don't really like using that word. If he doesn't stop, he's gonna get cut out. I'm gonna blur you. Anyways, we're just gonna...
Don't you love having a dog?
What?
Don't you love having a dog?
They're so fun. And now he's asleep. But I wanted to point out the difference between, again, like the documentary and a dramatized presentation of a crime. Again, I think it's different. Like, if we were talking about a movie, obviously that would be different because it's a fictional piece. But the reason why I think it makes me feel so icky is because it feels like they're taking a non fictional occurrence, an event, and they're making it feel like it's a fictional show. Like, if Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't real, it would very much feel like this was just a Netflix original, which
Yeah.
that's what makes me feel so weird about it. Um, because again, I want to point out how, like, they did have a conventionally attractive man play a criminal. And again, obviously someone has to play the part if they do a series like this, but I think it's important to not focus on like the great parts about a criminal, you know? Like a lot of that's what a lot of people are like glorifying this as. They're turning it into, you know, he wasn't that bad, or, you know, it was just he had something wrong with him, blah blah blah. And although I'm not someone who believes that media can make you do something, I don't think that, you know, listening to angry music or listening to rap or watching horror movies or watching whatever, that's not going to cause you to commit a crime. It it will, however, it will, however, give you almost like reasoning as to why it would be okay. You know,
Yeah.
because in this instance, you have someone who is now almost praised by a certain community for being a attractive man, and he's obviously he gets Netflix shows. He got, you know, all of these media. He got fancy pictures. He's got a whole Wikipedia page. And to us, it might seem like nonchalant things, like those things don't really matter. But to someone who does suffer with, you know, mental illness, or someone who is in a not great place and is thinking about these things, that can be a catalyst. Like that can be something that turns it into something that could be reasonable. It makes it seem okay because obviously, you know, other people got away with it and they're getting all of these great things and I want those great things. So, you know,
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen? Because a lot
Right.
of people seem to think that prison is better than, you know, life. Sometimes they're like, well, my life sucks anyways, so prison would be better.
Yeah.
Not the case, but
I don't know where that idea came from. I
I
remember
don't
like
know.
10, 15 years ago being like, prison's so scary. Like, I don't want to go to prison. All my friends saying the same thing. And now, like, I don't know. There's just so many people like glorifying killers and like, oh, doing horrible things just for the attention they'll get from it. And it's just
It's
so,
a lot of it is
ugh.
chronically online people, and that's
Buzzword.
again, that's probably going to be an episode. At least if Spoons doesn't do it, I probably will because it's a whole topic and it needs to be talked about more. And coming from, I call myself a recovering chronically online person. So,
Me too.
um, anyways, the last thing I want to talk about is the Dahmer's victims are real people, as well as the family of the victims. And it feels incredibly disrespectful to have these high paid actors play them as a character. And especially because a lot of the people have no idea like how the victims died. They just know like the buzzwords that come along with the name Jeffrey Dahmer. Um, so I encourage you, if you think it's like, oh, he just murdered 16 people, he did a lot more. It was
Yeah.
like very much so a very terrible situation that all of these victims were put in. Um, so if there's anything you would like to add before I talk about or list all the victims, you can go ahead.
I just think like I don't know. It's kind of the true crime genre. I think is this is me just talking very generally about the true crime genre. There's a lot of people who are doing great things for the community and trying to educate and inform and help people be safer in their everyday lives and even reach out to some of those communities that may be feeling like, oh, like I look up to Jeffrey Dahmer or I find him inspirational. Like obviously it's a very small subsect of people, but there are people who are trying to reach out to that community and kind of steer them away from that line of thinking, which I think is very admirable. But then you have things like this, like the Netflix series, and it's just very glorifying, and it's doing the exact opposite of what we should be doing with true crime. And I just think like there needs to be a change, and there have already been instances where things like this have caused people to do bad things, and I don't know why we haven't learned from that. Like, I'm afraid we never will, because it's so rampant and abundant, and like the more media there is about it, the more people are going to be quote unquote inspired by it, and someday we're gonna regret all of these horrible quote unquote documentaries that have been made.
Yeah.
But we said
I
the same
agree.
thing about COVID too. We were like, oh, things are gonna change. We're finally gonna learn. And now we're just,
The only thing that's changed is
No.
now we have a new group of Karens to hate.
that's true. Yeah.
That's about
So
it.
I like to think that society learns and changes and evolves, but the more I live on this earth, the more I realize that it's just not true. Sorry to end on such a pessimistic note, but
No, I don't think there is any optimism, unfortunately, in this episode. The only thing that I can say is just Netflix needs to do better. I think the whole entire true crime genre, fandom, whatever you want to call it, needs to do better.
Yeah.
Because there's a line, and I don't know if anyone knows where that line is right now, but I think we need to find it and not cross it.
I think there's a line no one knows where it is, but somehow everyone has managed to cross it.
Yeah, it's just it's crazy.
Yeah.
I do want to say, before I read off the names of these victims, there is one victim name that I cannot find a pronunciation for. I will put it on the screen so you guys can see it. He was 14 years old. But I do not want to attempt to mispronounce this name. It's incredibly long. I don't want to disrespect anyone. I'll put it in the chat so Spoons can see it.
I see it,
But
yeah.
I don't want to attempt to mispronounce that name. But I will put it on the screen. So this is in order from earliest to latest. But we have Stephen Hicks, who was the first victim. He was 18. We have Stephen Tomey, 25. James Dockstader, 14. Richard Guerrero, 22. Anthony Sears, who was 24. Raymond Smith, who was 32. I believe he was the oldest victim. Edward Smith, who was 27. Ernest Miller, who was 22. David Thomas, who was also 22. Curtis Strotter, who was 17. Errol Lindsay, who was 19, who is the family member to Eric Perry and Rita Isbell. Tony Hughes, who was 31, the 14-year-old victim, who I cannot pronounce the name for, I apologize. Matt Turner, who was 20, Jeremiah Weinberger, who was 23, Oliver Lacey, who was 24, and Joseph Bradhoft, who was 25. So, thank you for your encouragement. Those were the 16 victims. Technically, he does have 17, but one of them was not killed. That was I believe, the person who got him arrested. But that's all I have for Jeffrey Dahmer. He was not a great person. And moral of the story, screw you, Netflix.
Screw you, Netflix.
I didn't think I would feel sad after this, but I really feel just icky again.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, I feel like weighed down, you know?
Yeah. It's, especially after reading the victim names, it's just,
Yeah.
I think we forget sometimes that this is real and it happened. Also pretty close to me. These were in Ohio and Wisconsin, so.
Yeah.
Ugh. I don't like that.
Let's finish this fucking episode, man.
Yeah.
Take us out, Apple.
I appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. This was a heavier episode. If you guys do have any topics that you would like us to cover in the future, you can leave them in the comments below. There will be a pinned comment. And if you're on Spotify, we would appreciate it if you would rate us 5 stars. You don't have to, obviously. Rate us whatever you think we deserve. But a 5-star rating helps us and gets us to a wider audience. hopefully next episode won't be this heavy. But I just think it's very topical. It's going on right now. This was released, I believe, on the 23rd of September, so I just felt the need to talk about it because a lot of people don't even know what's going on. They're just watching the show because it has Evan Peters and it's in top 10. I think it's like number 3 right now on Netflix still. So, yeah, just be aware, you know. Think about content before you consume.
Yes.
Critical thinking skills, guys. But yeah, we appreciate you. And we will talk to you next week. Or 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.